Joan, you've studied and written about how the business sector can participate in climate change and sustainable energy. I guess they participate in climate change in ways both good and bad, come to think of it. But can you talk a little bit about some of the challenges and opportunities you see out there, particularly examples you've noticed in Europe as you looked at that?
Mm-hmm. Well, a large part of what I talk about in Emerald Cities is the kind of policy that's put in place that allows the business sector to invest in new technologies. And so whether it's a high level of investment in research on renewable energy, Germany is probably the best example where they have the portfolio standards, but even more importantly, what propelled their industry was the feed-in tariff. And that's a little different. The portfolio standard is more of a market mechanism, whereas the feed-in tariff tells utilities not you have to produce a certain percentage of your electricity the way the RPS does, but it tells utilities you have to buy all of the renewable energy that is produced. And what that does is also creates a stable investment environment. If a company knows that for the next, these usually are 20 years, that they will be guaranteed a market for their energy at above market prices, but that subsidy goes down over that 20 years, then they can invest in getting that technology to be cost competitive with fossil fuels. And we're seeing many states, including California, start to implement feed-in tariffs. So I think in general that there has to be a policy environment, whether it's the production tax credit, RPS, feed-in tariff, that supports businesses in making the investment in technologies.
So in general, Joan, just to follow up, do you think that the United States is ready to take meaningful action in this area, or can we even generalize the country as a whole?
Politically, I don't think we're there. I think, what the president is left to do is to try to do what he can by executive order. We see the debate going on with the sequester right now that, raising revenue that could be invested in R&D doesn't seem to be on the table. So I think it's a real tough political environment. Where you're seeing the action is at the state level. California, Massachusetts, North Carolina, very different strategies, but states pursuing it as an economic development strategy. New York is using its NYSERDA, its main energy investment and economic development agency, is choosing centers of excellence in different areas. One that I've been following is in the Syracuse area with Syracuse University and the State University there, making big investment in the indoor environmental quality sector. And this is around making systems more efficient in buildings, HVAC systems, but trying to build a whole sector of the local economy. So building supply, green building supply is a big one as well. But these are predominantly state level initiatives.
I was going to say that's a good segue for locally, and I think, Cheryl, correct me if I'm wrong, I think this is part of the Envision Charlotte. This building is part of Envision Charlotte, which is a program that was launched by Duke and other businesses, and it's a very simple premise: reduce energy use in the major downtown office buildings. So let's start with you, Michael. What do you think of this program? I'm not sure how familiar you are with it, but just what are your initial thoughts on it?
So there's, as I understand it, there's a city program called Envision Charlotte, and there is a Duke Energy component called Smart Energy Now. I'm more familiar with Smart Energy Now, the Duke Energy program. So I'll speak to that. I think it's a wildly successful program. What is interesting to us, there are a lot of programs that focus on improving insulation or improving something physical. A large part of Smart Energy Now is a behavioral component. It's about trying to influence the occupants of these buildings in downtown Charlotte to reduce their consumption. Turn off the lights when you're not in a room. That's really interesting. We applaud that. One aspect, though, we would like to see is where building owners can get their occupants to reduce consumption. They're still going to learn that there are some improvements they can make in the building. We would love to see Duke Energy help create another option, on-bill recovery or on-bill finance, to help building owners improve the measures in their building to make them more energy efficient. The other thing I'll say we'd love to see is Smart Energy Now to roll out to other cities in North Carolina. So great program, but we believe Duke Energy can ratchet it up and roll out some improvements also.
Joan, when you hear programs like this, and they're all over the country, and we have public awareness campaigns, are these more feel-good, or do you think that they actually can have some impact and benefit?
Now, I think they're critically important for a number of reasons. One, they bring visibility and awareness to the importance of energy efficiency. I think by having the business sector and leading businesses behind it, it raises awareness in a way that a campaign going into houses putting insulation can't. You're seeing state-of-the-art technology. Also, if you look at the carbon inventories that many cities are doing, what they're often finding is that we have one example we use here, the city of Chelsea, where 3 industrial properties use something like 30% of the city's electricity. So it's often the case that the high users are concentrated in the commercial and industrial sector. And so if you get those 10 top users in any given city on board with efficiency, then it just filters out through the rest of the city. So I think that's a really important element of it. You mentioned kind of the behavioral change, and that's true. But I also think that what you're seeing in some of these buildings in Envision Charlotte and other cities throughout the country as well is that the idea is not to rely on people to do the right thing, but to engineer it in. So rather than having people turn out their lights, you want to put in a system that if there's no movement in a room, then the lights automatically go out. I mean, this happens in my office all the time, and I'm forever having to go like this to get the lights to go back on. But that's what I'm seeing, is that thinking of ways to engineer it in or to build on people's competitive spirit. One of the examples that I find so interesting is in Australia, in Newcastle, Australia, where the city put a huge billboard in the downtown that shows real-time electrical usage. And the city is divided into 12 districts. So each district can see their actual consumption. And then they've also done this in schools. And there's competitions to see which school can reduce its energy consumption the most. And by having it real time and having it a public interest campaign, it's really brought people on board. One thing I think, though, that we need to think about is how do you ramp it up? So you've got Envision Charlotte in the downtown, and a big focus of my next book, it's called Greenovation, is looking at eco-districts. And an eco-district is a defined area in a city. The ones that I've looked at in Europe, Hammarby Sjöstad in Stockholm, and the Western Harbor in Malmö, Vauban in Freiburg, one in Hamburg, one in Lyon. What they do, in some cases, they were former industrial sites, very large areas of the city, where they just said, let's do everything best practice. Energy efficiency, renewable energy, minimization of waste to energy systems, and then say, what can we learn from that now we can take through the rest of the city? And we're starting to see that in North America. Probably the best example there is Vancouver, the area that was the former Olympics. They're using district energy there. It's just amazing to see. And I think those kind of excite people. They elevate urban planning practices so that these localized strategies then can become infiltrated through the rest of the city. And they show to the public exactly what can be done. And so I think the next step I would take is, yes, you want to take Envision Charlotte to other cities, but you also want to say, what else can we do to make this the most efficient or the highest renewable energy, the greenest city in the state?
For both of you, I'm wondering, since we've gone through a lot of issues here, what do you think is the most misunderstood or most misrepresented issue when we talk about sustainable energy and climate change? And I'm not talking about politicians so much as the general public.
Well, there's so many. I mean, going back to the whole scientific illiteracy about climate change, I think is a real problem. I think an important concept that's not part of what the public understands is two related things: peak power and a negawatt. So Amory Lovins coined this term, a negawatt. It's a watt of electricity not used, and that's our first order of change. Even renewable energy is attractive. You want to have a solar panel on your house, maybe your town generating wind energy. But the most important thing to do is to reduce that load, because ultimately it's about peak power that determines whether a new power plant has to be built. And so I think just a basic understanding of that, the importance of all the energy efficiency measures that can be taken in the commercial, industrial, and residential sector, and getting energy use down and then moving into the renewable energies is something I think that the public still does not grasp.
Closer to home, what do you see?
I think what we're seeing is polls we've done. So we've run polls the last 3 years. We've used I'm going to call him a Republican pollster. There is not a real difference between old, young, Republican, Democrat in likely voters who support solar and energy efficiency. Those are in the high 80s in terms of overall support in North Carolina amongst this group of likely voters that were polled. So everybody seems to support clean energy. But when you get to the media and what we're told, it seems to be transfigured or transmogrified into a blue versus red idea. I think that's the biggest issue or misperception right now. It's not a blue or red issue. In fact, if you look, the Department of Revenue, for whatever reason, there's a law that individuals who take the renewable energy tax credit, your name is actually disclosed. And you can find this on the Department of Revenue's website. You can look at that and go to the Board of Elections site and look at some of the folks and what their political affiliations are. And it confirms that the biggest takers, those who are taking over $10,000 a year in the tax credit, they're independents, Republicans, Democrats, almost equally. So clean energy should not be a politicized issue. Unfortunately, it is for whatever reason.
You have a blue tie, I have a red tie.
May I respond to that?
Yes.
I think it's all in the framing. So who wants clean energy? Who's not going to be for it? But if you look at the last election and the PACs supported by the Koch brothers, who obviously have oil interests, and where the spending went in the election, I don't know how you can't frame it as a Republican Democratic issue. And then even if you look at the states and where the investment has gone, so I would like to believe that we're all one big happy country supporting the same policies, but if you look at where the money goes, I don't see how you can support that.
I would say you've got to educate folks. So that's what our government affairs team is doing. It's talking to Republican legislators and saying, look who's taking the tax credit. Look what jobs are being created in your districts. This is not something that you should shy away from or dislike because you think on a national level this is a Democratic issue. And as far as we can tell, we're gaining some traction with those legislators.
Well, let's get to the good questions now, which are your questions. So if anybody has a question out there, hopefully, anybody?
It's less a question than a comment. It's really, I think, very much a political question.
Okay, don't get too close to it.
Yeah, I really think it is red and blue throughout the country. You know, we can blame the media, and perhaps they are in part to blame, but it's our politicians that are following some strange thinking about this issue. We've seen, and your poll shows it, that it is, you know, in terms of people who choose some sort of renewable energy, that it's across the political spectrum. I find myself pretty much in the middle, and I am a solar energy producer from my home. So it is very much political. This country needs to wake up and do something about our very polarized countries. So, sorry, there's no question in there.
Oh, no, but that did prompt one quick question for Joan. Joan, do you know any idea what the numbers are right now on people in terms of the percentage of people who believe that climate change is occurring versus those who don't?
I don't know exact numbers. I think it's in the 50s in terms of a belief. I think the question is about the man-made. Is this just some part of a natural cycle? Is where you see a lot of doubt coming in that you know, that would suggest that we created it and thus, you know, we have to respond to it. But there is a lot of doubt, and you know, this science is very tricky in terms of predictions of exactly what, you know, is going to take place.
I'm June Blatnick, Clean Air Carolina, and I'm a big supporter of Envision Charlotte, and am involved in that. But Duke Energy has submitted their integrated resource plan to the Utilities Commission. Tomorrow night here in Charlotte, we've got a hearing on that. And as good as Envision Charlotte and Smart Energy Now is, energy efficiency, their projections for energy efficiency 20 years from now is minuscule compared to coal, natural gas, and nuclear. So how can we push the utilities to really get a bigger part of their portfolio and looking 20 years from now to really focus on that smart grid, energy efficiency, and programs like Envision Charlotte?
Well, so
Lucky you.
let me put a little disclaimer in here. We are actually interveners in the IRP, so I'm going to be very cagey on what I say. The IRPs project out for 20 years for each of the utilities. They are models. They are not great predictors of the future. They can give you an idea of where they're going. But there's a lot that can change in the next 20 years. We might have a carbon tax. We might have a national RPS. We might have incredible integration of electric vehicles. We might have battery technology that becomes cost-effective and feasible. So with all this variability and uncertainty, the IRPs are essentially designed to give the Utilities Commission and the state as a whole an idea of what generation and transmission they need to be thinking about over the next 20-year window. We looked at the the utilities' projections, and we were pleased because they were projecting a greater integration of energy efficiency and renewables in 2012, in their 2012 filings, than they had in their 2011 filings. To us, that was an improvement year over year. In terms of what they're projecting out 20 years, I don't know that the IRP is the docket in which substantive changes are going to be made by the utilities. I think our Court of Appeals has said this proceeding is essentially like a legislative fact-finding session. The Utilities Commission is not in a position to order individual utilities within the IRP proceeding to take or not take specific actions. So what I would say is there might be other dockets where pressure could be applied more effectively to the utilities to increase their energy efficiency integration.
Michael, can you speak briefly about our request for data access as part of the IRP? Because that relates directly to James' question.
I can. I don't want to sell what we're asking for too much, but I will since you've asked the question. So what we have asked for in the IRP process is for the Commission to open a separate rulemaking where they would address our, in my opinion, antiquated rules that deal with access to consumer energy usage data. So this ties into Envision Charlotte and Smart Energy Now. So one of the things these building owners do is provide data to the tenants, and Duke Energy is providing data to the building owners. Data is critical for research and for awareness as to what energy efficiency can achieve, and it's great for learning about things like peak. So we have asked for the utility to, or the Commission to, make it easier for customers to access their own data electronically, make it easier for customers to authorize third parties like smart grid companies to access the customer's data, analyze, digest it, and report to the customers. And we've also asked for the Commission to make it easier for research institutions, universities, local governments, to access aggregated data for example, an entire building or a neighborhood, so that research can be done and publications can be sent out using real data, high-level resolute data.
Joan, I'm curious, what do you, just speaking generally, since I know you don't study Duke Energy 24 hours a day, what is the difference or the impact between the utilities' just basic desire to be efficient and make more money and the influence of public policy in terms of driving efficiency and better practices?
Well, I think ultimately, utilities are in the business of selling energy, and the more energy they sell, the better for them. So, of course, there has to be public policy to make it in their interest to sell less, and while still remaining profitable. There's where the portfolio standards, the feed-in tariffs become essential in regulating the amount of investment in renewables. But again, I think we have to be very cautious about how we do it. And so the direct subsidy of renewable companies right now is probably not the way we should go, but more with the production tax credit and certainly a lot more investment in renewable energy technologies.
Let me take one last question before we let Cheryl close. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm George Roy of the Board Organization. Thank you. Just wanted to ask a question about PACE, property assessed clean energy, as far as legislation and the potential for funding. What insights you might have on the potential that it has nationally and in the here in North Carolina specifically, as a way to do the deeper retrofits on buildings where there's kind of a disconnect between potentially the property owners and the occupants, and a way to move forward with that process of upgrading existing buildings.
So I can speak to this at a certain level. PACE, my understanding is the problem And perhaps I should take a step back and sort of describe what I understand PACE to be. So let's say I've got a mortgage on my house. I might take a loan out from my local government to do an energy retrofit. The problem with PACE, I think, and the reason it kind of shut down for a while was the local government was treating that essentially as a tax liability on my part, and so it was taking super priority over my loan. My mortgage lender, backed by the federal government, did not like that. And so this priority issue sort of shut down PACE for a while. I think folks are moving forward. Some local governments I think are deciding, well, we're willing to subordinate the priority of our PACE loan to the mortgage, and that will help. I think ultimately PACE needs to be a part of a suite of options. So on-bill recovery, on-bill refinance, PACE. Other folks have their private options for financing also, that we want to help encourage as many options as possible so that folks take advantage of at least one of those options.
Joan, you get the last word.
Yeah, well, another way this problem works is, in large buildings, whether they're residential or commercial, the owner doesn't necessarily have an interest in investing in energy efficiency technologies if it's the tenants that are paying the cost. And that's the problem that many of the energy efficiency programs have had to get around and make it in their interest. And one of the things that's also being discovered by owners of properties and landlords is that they can get higher rents for properties that have many of the energy efficiency features. So it's kind of that split incentive problem that many of the programs are working to resolve, as well as the PACE incentive.
Please join me in thanking Joan, Michael, and Eric for their thoughts this morning. This is very exciting for us. This is the first time that we have done one of these Local Leaders series using the technology. And Joan, thank you for participating that way. I think it was really nice to see how education has evolved and how the conversations have evolved, not just on this topic, but in broad. We have a couple gifts for you before you leave, so don't run off, and Joan will get yours up to you there in Boston. Since I have the floor, I thought I would tell you about the material that you have at your seats here and call a couple things to your attention. The first one is the Your Industry, Your Business, Your Partner piece. I mentioned in my opening comments that we really, as a university, look to partner with business and industry. As an education, as a research educational institution, we benefit by aligning our programs with the industries with which we serve. And so in this booklet is a variety of ways to engage with us. I'll call out a couple of those opportunities because I have some plaints in the audience here. One of those ways is through co-op. Many of you may know that the university is known #1 in the United States for career services, and much of that is attributed to our signature co-op program, where our undergrad students leave the Boston area, travel to now 92 countries around the world, and spend 6 months working as full-time employees, and then bringing their academic knowledge to the employer and turning around and taking their work experience back to the classroom. And I am so thrilled that we have a co-op student here in our undergraduate biology program, Mara Scollin. Stand up, Mara. And Mara is a co-op student for June Blotnick at Clean Air Carolina. And June has already said she would provide testimony to the great things that she's doing. Great way to fill a talent pipeline with young, fresh minds who are bringing that perspective, and then also creating a talent pipeline for your future needs. So that's in here. As we conclude this program, Joan's going to take a quick break, and several of us in the room are going to move over to have another dialogue around a research collaborative based on a HUD grant that we received in Boston, and a similar program that is now underway here in Charlotte via Connect, many of you have heard of. And so we bring research expertise to the table as well. We would invite you to Look to us for health, security, and sustainability, our three centers of excellence in those domains. Lastly, if you or employees are interested in having an experience like this on a more academic level, we currently have 8 master's degree programs that we're offering here in Charlotte. Some of the most project management and leadership, which relate very nicely to these topics that we've talked about today. I'm pleased to announce that we have 2 additional programs coming that may be of interest to this crowd, hopefully this spring, and that's a Master's in Energy Systems and a Master's in Engineering Technologies. We'll also bring some out of our College of Computer and Information Sciences around information security and computer science, which may be of interest. So that information's in here. Last thing, I will put a plug in for our next Local Leaders Global Impact, which is happening in March. John Sylvia, those of you from Charlotte know the man, right? He's the leading expert in the global economies. He also happens to be a double Husky, baccalaureate degree and a PhD from Northeastern University. So caliber of our alum holds through here. And Dr. Ravi Ramamurthy, who is one of our faculty. I hope you will spread the word and come back and join us for that. We will wrap up the program now. Please take some food on your way out. If there's any questions that we can answer, we'd be happy to, and thank you for joining us today.